Welcome to Matt's Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me show you some photographs I took yesterday. I participated in an inside story about BRICS with Jane Dutton, who's a friend. Whilst I was waiting for the show to begin, I took some photographs from the balcony. It's on about the 10th floor overlooking the city. I got one photograph of Mohammed Ado on a live crossing with Doha, and then there are a couple of photos there of the city itself. The inside story was, what influence do BRICS nations have? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa may not seem to have much in common, but they've built a common ground through the international organization known by their acronym BRICS. The coalition held its summit in China this week to discuss security, governance, and trade. 5 other countries, including Egypt and Kenya, also attended the meeting. But what is the future of this group that does not get much attention on the world stage? Jane was the presenter, Sriram Chaulia, the Dean of the Jindal School of International Affairs, and Einar Tangen, an advisor to the Chinese government, and myself participated in it. And essentially I was saying that it really has become a vehicle for Xi Jinping in China. They dominated. I felt there's an arrhythmic heartbeat at the center between India and China, and that India was the one that had to stand down. If you think about it from a geopolitical perspective, China's now in Pakistan in a big way, right up against the border, dominant in the South China Sea, achieving dominance in the Indian Ocean, certainly not allowing India domination in the Indian Ocean. So I was talking about that geopolitical scenario amongst other issues. Emerging nations deserve a role, says President Xi Jinping. And the other point I was making was that the investment China has made in the One Belt, One Road is trillions of dollars in comparison to BRICS. And I said that investment is more key to China's position. I was also saying Washington has become an epicenter of geopolitical risks now, leaving a giant opening. And Xi Jinping is stepping into that opening, I feel. Xi Jinping Belt and Road Initiative, not a tool to advance any geopolitical agenda, but a platform for practical cooperation. My piece on the 28th of August was called China Rising. I said China's parabolic rise has been simply breathtaking. Millions of Chinese have been lifted out of poverty, and China continues to expand at a pace that other big economies can only dream about. Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road program binds the world to Beijing because all the roads and railways have but one destination, that is China. Washington has metasized into an epicenter of risk, Donald Trump refers, and talk of a unipolar US-dominated world have largely evaporated. Apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, freedom of navigation operations, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands and then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. It is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance, any which way you care to cut it. China has advanced its footprint in Pakistan, where it has leased the Gwadar port, giving China and Central Asia access to the Gulf region and the Middle East for 43 years. Sri Lanka, which gorged on Chinese debt, has had to disgorge the Hambantota port to its creditor. And recently we saw China formally open a military facility in Djibouti. These moves taken together speak to a material Chinese advance. And I think, look at BRICS, you've got to look at the fact that China is the elephant in the room. Goldman, events in Washington over the past 2 months play a far larger role in the gold rally, followed by a weaker dollar than North Korea. That might well be true. With respect to gold, Goldman Sachs turned neutral at 1375 to 1380, add-on pullbacks towards 1300 and not below 1296. We're last at 1338, and once we broke that triple-headed resistance at 1300, you can see we carried over. Talking about events in Washington over the past 2 months play a far larger role in the recent gold rally. I said in August, markets have watched incredulously as Washington metastasized into a new epicenter of global uncertainty. And then 22nd of May, I'd written another piece, Apocalypse Trump. Home Thoughts, a forgotten photo found, Tsavo West, Tish Town. We're, of course, headed there this weekend and looking forward to that. This is a photograph from Fitch Hatton's Twitter feed where we're going to stay. Tsavo's sunset is our favourite colour. What's yours? Tsavo is enormous and wild, and its history gives it a sense of awe I do not find anywhere else. This is a photograph of wild white flowers in Tsavo East. We're going to be in Tsavo West. And in Tsavo West, one of the features are the Shetani lava flows. Shetani means devil in Kiswahili. The flows were formed only a few hundred years ago, and local peoples believe that it was the devil himself emerging from the earth. This vast expanse of folded black lava spreads for 50 square kilometers across the savannah near the Chulu Hills, looking strangely as if Vesuvius dropped its comfort blanket here. The last major eruption here is believed to have taken place around 200 years ago. It's pretty spectacular. Nearby are the Shetani caves, which are also a result of volcanic activity. You'll need a torch, flashlight if you want to explore, but watch your footing on the razor-sharp rocks and keep an eye out for the local fauna. We've heard rumors that the caves are sometimes inhabited by hyenas who don't take kindly to being disturbed. And then another photograph I took of the sunset on Christmas Day in the Tsavo. The great blazing stars came out, the far receding hills got dim. I felt like an arrow that could shoot out all the way, Jack Kerouac. Went back to listening to some Maria Callas, particularly Puccini, O mio babino caro. And I'll put up a photograph of Maria Callas and Aristotle and Narcissus. She said, an opera begins long before the curtain goes up, ends long after it has come down. It starts in my imagination, it becomes my life, and it stays part of my life long after I've left the opera house. Don't talk to me about rules, dear. Wherever I stay, I make the goddamn rules. I like the look of this: marbled trout, green peas, raw almonds, strawberries, and chickweed. We're talking in the garden of Hisa Franco, which sits in the Soka Valley. The air is pure, and tree-covered hillsides sit below. Clear blue skies, herbs and vegetables grow on a slope behind the restaurant. Other produce is foraged in the valley. And here's another dish: tripe, fava beans, duck juice, cave cheese, fried nettles, and morels. Political reflections. Let's start with this photograph of the construction of the Twin Towers in 1970. Still not clear to me what was the real story there. North Korea would rather eat grass than give up the program, says Putin on the last day of the BRICS summit in China. The Independent asks, strange as it sounds, this might be a cry for help from North Korea, given the amount of US military hardware in Northeast Asia and the continuing lack of a peace treaty between North Korea and the South. More than 60 years after hostilities ceased, it would be entirely rational for Kim Jong-un to be looking for a stable and secure peace, but to remain intent on doing so without betraying weakness. The question whether the UN or for Swiss mediators, or indeed for Donald Trump, should be how to help North Korea get from here to there without accidentally falling into a war along the way. Indeed, I think, or we offer him some extraordinary financial package. But, he's a smart negotiator. He's learned lessons from what's happened to some of his precursors, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi. About 2 years ago, I came across this little clip. Listen to it, because you can hear President Assad, you can hear Hassan Nasrallah, and it was in 2015, Victory is Near, it was called. Indeed, the Syrian government has breached a 3-year ISIS siege on Deir ez-Zor. And that's a big deal. Russian frigate Admiral Essen fired caliber cruise missiles at Islamic State targets near the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor on Tuesday as well. Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi on Wednesday blamed terrorists for a huge iceberg of misinformation on the violence in Rakhine State. Made no mention of the nearly 126,000 Rohingya Muslims who have fled over the border to Bangladesh since August 25. I always believed the Nobel Prize was given for the certainty of the recipient's moral compass. This is just appalling. If there's one person who's changed the political conversation more than anyone else in the past year, it's Bannon, says Politico. He was never the shadow president that breathless liberals dubbed him, and perhaps not even the great manipulator of Time magazine's dark and portentous cover. But if there's a single person who's changed the American political conversation more than anyone else in the past year, Steve Bannon. Donald Trump blew into office with a basket of instinctive political beliefs, law and order, trade protection, anti-elitism that felt incoherent in today's America's party landscape. They were immediately recognizable to Bannon, who had spent the past several years knitting those impulses into a new strain of right populist politics at Breitbart News. There's no neat phrase to describe just what Bannon is, a Navy vet and former Goldman Sachs banker who transformed himself into a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. Most recently, he became a kind of intellectual Svengali to a diffuse group of people who might not have seen themselves as anything in common until Bannon began articulating it and gave it a tribune as chief executive of Trump's campaign. Call it Trumpism or Bannonism, but it's anti-immigrant, anti-global, blue-collar, nationalist worldview, now content with the 1980s style free market constitutionalism for the soul of the Republican Party. Brazilian former presidents Lula and Rousseff have been charged in a corruption case. International markets, the yield on 2-year Canadian government bonds briefly pushed above those of the US. Currency markets, let's take a look at that. The euro, where is that? 119.25, Draghi's up tomorrow. Dollar index softening, 92.27. Dollar yen, 108.66. Swiss franc, 0.9543. The pound's at 130.28. That's firm, crossing 130 again. Australian dollar, let's take a look at that. 0.7984, having topped 0.80 yesterday. Indian rupee 64.108. South Korean won 11.3320. The Rial 3.1170. Egyptian pounds at 17.631. And the South African rand is at 12.9082. Dollar index is falling away again. I'll put up a 1-year chart for you. The dollar isn't as safe as you think it is. Using VIX as a proxy, relationship between the dollar and risk sentiment is unstable at best, says Bloomberg. Dollar yen, of course, the yen has been bid on the geopolitical uncertainty that we've been seeing, 108.66. Now, if the Bank of Japan does not step in, then it's a very quick move that could go down just below 105. But I suspect they've been hard at work. are going to come back to work again to defend this area for about 108.30. Crude oil at an inflection point, says T Commodity, last trading at $49.02. We could get as high as 50.50 on WTI and still remain in this trend that we've been in. Copper, of course, has had liftoff. Take a look at this chart of copper from T Commodity. And among many other points he mentions, this potentially alarming technical indicator. This is Stuart Wallace talking about copper. Chart of the day: could US orange juice futures be heading back to 2016 highs if Hurricane Elma hits Florida? Orange juice jumps surged as Hurricane Irma strengthened to become a Category 5 storm and remained on course to hit Florida later this week, threatening crops. Sub-Saharan Africa, fantastic article by Reuters, special reports they call themselves. A crocodile, white farmers and the British, the dark underbelly of Zimbabwean politics exposed. A potential successor to the nation's founding president wants to make radical changes, including rehabilitating white farmers to rescue the economy, sources and intelligence documents say. In January, a photograph appeared in Zimbabwe's media showing Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa enjoying drinks with a friend. In his hand was a large novelty mug emblazoned with the words, "I am the boss." To supporters of President Mugabe, the inscription bordered on treason. They suspected Mnangagwa, nicknamed the crocodile, let's call him that from now, and already saw himself in the shoes of Mugabe. He's 93 years old, increasingly frail, and the only leader the Southern African nation has known since it gained independence from Britain in 1980. According to politicians, diplomats, and a trove of hundreds of documents from inside Zimbabwe's Central Intelligence Organization, reviewed by Reuters, the crocodile and other political players have been positioning themselves the day Mugabe either steps down or dies. The documents and sources say the crocodile, a 73-year-old lawyer and long-standing ally of Mugabe, envisages cooperating with Tsvangirai to lead a transitional government for 5 years with the tacit backing of some of Zimbabwe's military and Britain. The unity government would pursue a new relationship with thousands of white farmers. The crocodile feels that reviving the commercial agriculture sector is vital, according to the documents. Mnangagwa realizes he needs the white farmers on the land when he gets into power. He will use the white farmers to resuscitate the agricultural industry, which he reckons is the backbone of the economy. A June 13 reports that Mugabe was in extremely poor health and has told his wife Grace that his days on earth are fast becoming less and less. Top security force officials have been clandestinely meeting with the crocodile for the past few days to discuss Mugabe. They all agree that Mugabe is now a security threat due to his ill health. When Mugabe took power after colonial rule in 1980, he inherited an economy flush with natural resources, modern commercial farms, and a well-educated labor force. Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere told him at the time, "You've inherited a jewel, keep it that way." Mugabe loyalists and inexperienced black farmers took over the land. The economy went into free fall. Before 2000, farming accounted for 40% of all exports. A decade later, the figure was just 3%. GDP almost halved from 1998 to 2008. The Crocodiles faction is dubbed Team Lacoste because Lacoste has that crocodile insignia after the crocodile-branded French fashion chain. On the other side is G40, a group of young ZANU-PF members who have coalesced around Mugabe's 52-year-old wife, Grace. In the so-called Gukarundi crackdown, the army's North Korean-trained 5th Brigade killed an estimated 20,000 people, most of them from the minority Ndebele tribe. At that time, the crocodile was, I think, internal security. Grace reckons that the Mnangagwa camp is full of sellouts who are working with the British to remove her husband from power. She would, wouldn't she? Thousands of white farmers want to come back. Farming is a difficult life. There are easier ways to make money. But he added, for a lot of the guys who left, it's in their blood. That's why they want to come back. Arrested Rwandan politician Diane Rwigara has been released, according to the latest media reports. The South African economy grew 2.5% quarter on quarter, second quarter 2017 growth, relatively broad-based, but helped by agriculture. And do you remember I said earlier in the year there had been better rains in the south, and that was going to support these economies. So we've had a bounce off the bottom. Take a look at these two photographs, Putin and Zuma bromance, BRICS 2017. South African oil shares up 10.84% this year, dollar versus rand. The rand is firm to below 13. Egyptian pound is at 17.635, and they have cleared a multi-billion-dollar FX backlog. Foreign currency requests from importers and foreign companies since floating the pound in November, a central bank official said. The figures add to growing evidence that Egypt's external finances have improved since abandoning most currency controls in November as part of a sweeping economic program. Nigeria's economy also emerged from recession in the second quarter, expanding 0.55% year on year. Very anemic. Nigeria's cabinet meeting was cancelled for the second time since Buhari's return. The Nigerian oil shares up 32.39% this year. Ghana's stock exchange is up 45.15% this year. Off the beaten track is going where few have ventured and are not likely to. Look, very interesting aardvark safaris. And then I like this photograph that Carol Rodosi from Tanzania took and posted. Kenya's Odinga rejects election rerun date without guarantees. Said on Tuesday's coalition would not participate in the rerun of a presidential election proposed for October 17th unless it's given legal and constitutional guarantees. You cannot do a mistake twice and expect to get different results, he said. On Monday, the election board said it would hold new elections on October the 17th. But Odinga said he wanted elections held on October the 24th or the 31st instead. This is probably Raila Odinga's best opportunity to win an election. The amount of scrutiny is going to be huge, and clearly if there was interference with the system, which a lot of people now seem to think there was, and they've identified how it was done, gives them significant leverage. Very interesting interview by John Eglinby about Safaricom with Bob Collymore. Safaricom Chief Executive Collymore says, we want to go into space that no one is in at the moment and no one is in commerce. That's planning a cross-border expansion for the first time into the untapped market for e-commerce and mobile payments. Said Safaricom would initially target its East African neighbours, but is also considering West Africa. The country's market cap reached $10.5 billion on August 29 after its share price hit an all-time high of 27.25, but has slipped by 9% in the stock market sell-off after the Supreme Court nullified the result of last month's presidential election. Analysts said the big prize would be to establish a foothold in Ethiopia, which this year overtook Kenya as the largest economy in the region and has a population of 100 million. But they acknowledged it would be hard because foreign banks, telecom companies and retailers are banned from the country. Other countries would see Safaricom as a bit more of a threat if we come in as a mobile operator, but we want to go into white space that no one is in at the moment and no one is in e-commerce. Safaricom's version of e-commerce, to be called Masoko, would aim to be more like China's Alibaba and combine e-commerce and mobile payments rather than Amazon. Amazon has inventory and is managing logistics. We don't want to hold inventory, he says. Several e-commerce companies operate in Kenya, the largest being Jumia. Others include Kilimall and OLX. Most follow Amazon's business model of holding inventory, and the sector is still very small. Sales are estimated at under 1% of mobile payments, according to the Communications Authority of Kenya. Expansion will be funded by Safaricom's telecom business in Kenya. In the year to March 2017, it recorded a 27% increase in pre-tax profit, helped in large part by a 32% growth in revenue from its M-Pesa mobile money platform. Mr. Collymore took over as CEO in 2010 and has had his contract renewed for 2 years in May. Plans to roll out Masoko in Kenya later this year to prove the concept. Mr. Collymore said the expansion had been made possible by the completion last month of the sale of 35% of the company by Vodafone to South Africa's Vodacom, which is majority owned by Vodafone. This really unshackled us, he said. Until now, anything outside of Kenya was Vodacom's territory as far as Vodafone as a shareholder was concerned. Now Safaricom can take services like payments into other markets. Francis Mwangi of Standard Investment Bank said Safaricom's overseas expansion was a natural evolution. It's now a platform operating business, more than just a telco. The big question is, will it succeed? Many of their initiatives have worked very well, but not all. Ahmed Salim of Teneos said entering the Ethiopian market would be an intriguing proposition. If any company can do it, it would be Safaricom. Collymore said Safaricom is also taking on specialist staff to analyze 2 terabytes of data, customer data generated every day. At the moment, it's like a big library, and with all the books on the floor, we don't know how to find this stuff, he said. Safaricom's expansion is still at risk from a pending report by the regulator, the CAK, into whether it abused its dominant position. Unlikely to happen. Safaricom is up 34.3% on a total return basis this year. Have a look at my interview after the full year results when we touched on a lot of these points in that interview. Market standing, Kenya Purchasing Managers Index slid to 42 from 48.1 in July, hitting a record low. Kenya shilling 103.25, well behaved. Nairobi all share ticked 0.98% higher yesterday, narrowing its loss since the Supreme Court announcement to 4.29%. It's still up 21.42% this year. In the NSE 20, that fell again, minus 0.97%. It's down 6.38% since the Supreme Court ruling, but it's still up 18.32% year to date. Thank you for stopping by. I can't wait to go to the Tsavo.